Mr Angus Robertson.
Very much, Mr Speaker. May I begin by expressing my sadness and that of all members of the Scottish National Party about the untimely death of Charles Kennedy. Most people in the political village, most people here, knew that he had been unwell for quite some time. During the last Parliament, our offices on the third floor of Portcullis House were just around the corner from one another, and we would bump into each other regularly coming to the chamber or returning from committees. It was clear that he was still having to battle his challenges, but not in my worst dreams did I ever imagine that he would be taken from us at the young age of 55. Politics is a very hard business, Mr Speaker, and while I and my colleagues delighted that the SNP won the constituency of Ross, Skye and Lochaber, I was genuinely saddened that Charles Kennedy would no longer be in Parliament. It's a mark of the man that when I got in touch with him after the general election, he readily agreed to meet up and share his experience of his leadership of the Liberal Democrats when that was the third party in the House of Commons. People across politics will attest to the generosity of spirit that Charles Kennedy showed to people on all sides of the party divides. And for those who haven't yet had the opportunity, I would strongly recommend that they strongly urge everybody to read the blog by Alasdair Campbell, which illustrates his friendship. My predecessor as Member of Parliament for Murray, Margaret Ewing, and Charles Kennedy were very, very good friends, and I know that there are others in this House and elsewhere that enjoyed that friendship and mutual respect tremendously. We all know that Charles Kennedy was a formidable and witty debater, and his skills were honed long before he was elected to this chamber, unbelievably, at the age of 23. His skills were honed at his beloved Glasgow University. Now, as anybody who has debated against anybody from Glasgow University, they will attest to the prodigious talent that has come through the Glasgow University Union and the Dialectic Society. It's in a league of its own. It's won more world championships than Oxford and Cambridge combined. In the Observer Mace, Glasgow has won 15 times, significantly more than any other university. And Charles Kennedy was one of the top-drawer debaters, winning the Observer Mace, an accolade shared with the former leader of the Labour Party, John Smith, with the former Secretary of State for Scotland and First Minister Donald Dewar, and with my honourable friend, the member for East Dunbartonshire. My abiding memory of Charles Kennedy, however, is in this chamber, and it was in his powerful condemnation of the Iraq War, a position that was shared between the Liberal Democrats and the Scottish National Party. Charles Kennedy forensically questioned the Prime Minister of the time, repeatedly on the case for war, on the lack of evidence of weapons of mass destruction, on the role of the United Nations and international law. His speeches and questions at that time have stood the test of time, and they underline that his convictions were right while others trooped through the lobbies in support of what was an illegal war. Charles Kennedy was a giant in Scottish and in UK politics. He was a lad of Pearts from Lochaber, an area of Scotland he was very proud. He led his party to historic successes whilst remaining rooted in the real world, and was liked by people of all political persuasions, and there's few people in politics who can live up to that. It is such a tragedy that he died so young, and our condolences go to his family, his friends, his son Donald, and all of his party colleagues in the Liberal Democrats.
Hear, hear. Dr Liam Fox.
Speaker, I had the honour and pleasure of knowing Charles for some 37 years. When I first went to Glasgow University Union, he was already the star of the debating chamber there. In fact, he was the preeminent debater of his generation. He was terrifying to speak against, but a positive joy to compete alongside. He had tremendous debating skills with which he regularly enriched this chamber, and it's a pity that those members who were elected just last month will never have the joy of seeing how enriching he could be to this House of Commons. He was a man of considerable wit, as has been mentioned, great charm, phenomenal intelligence. He was absolutely passionate about his politics, and he had very deep-seated views. But however passionate he was, there was never a hint of malice or threatening behaviour from him. He was one of those great politicians who would absolutely love to have a blazing row with you in the House of Commons and a chirpy pint with you in the Strangers' Bar half an hour later. He was a man of great authenticity in an era where the public feel that politicians are moulded to be as colourless as possible. He was a man of great integrity who spoke from the heart about the issues that he cared so much about. And he loved this place. From the minute that he came here, I remember coming to see him a few weeks after his election, he absolutely loved the House of Commons. But however important he became in this place, he was never self-important at any time. I will remember him for integrity, humanity and decency. I wonder how many of us in this House will have that accolade. And I'm very sad for his family, for their untimely loss, but I'm sad for us all, because our entire public life is poorer for his passing.
Dr. Alasdair McDonnell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And could I reiterate the words of my previous speaker here? It is a sad day for all of us in this House. I feel privileged to have this opportunity to speak and to express my condolences and those of my party, the SDLP, to the family and friends of our good friend and colleague, the late Charles Kennedy. From a distance, I first became aware of Charles when, as something of a boy wonder, he stormed to election as a member of this House way back in the early 80s. Later, I had occasion to meet him at various events, and he was always generous, warm, humble, humorous. In a word, very, very human. And that has been reflected by the comments of others here today. Charles reached out to everyone, and as has been remarked earlier, listening as much as talking. When I was elected here to this House, I got to know him better, and he was always kind, considerate, helpful, and in a word, a genuine great human being. And I'm so heartened to hear so many warm comments here from people across the House today. We have heard honourable colleagues refer already to his wisdom in Iraq and the perils that would follow it. He was a formidable politician and a great colleague, not least on Iraq, but across a whole range of issues, including Europe, and his great passion that he had for Europe. Today, we are all much the lesser for his going. He has gone to his eternal reward much, much too soon. And I extend my deep sympathies to his family and to his friends. And I pray that God in his mercy will look kindly on Charlie's gentle soul.
Sir Edward Leigh.
If I may just say a few words, because I walked into this House for the first time as a member with Charles almost 32 years to the day. And he was already really amongst our new intake quite a celebrity. We were just another large Tory intake. You know, Mr. Speaker, they come and they go. But he had fought and won his Highland seat. And really, for all those 32 years that I served with him in this House and on the Council of Europe, I never, of course I was always a political opponent, but in a way I always felt that we were soulmates. And sometimes he had to go against the groove and I had to, but there was something there very powerful. I think his faith was very powerful. And I like to think that in some previous life, he and I might have marched together in some hopeless Highland cause, perhaps as Jacobites, I don't know. But his causes were never hopeless, and I think his legacy will live on. And let me just say just a brief moment about that, because I think it's been said, for instance, on the Iraq War, that he wanted to place his party as a radical alternative to Labour, but I think it went much deeper than that and was more powerful. And my right honourable friend for Rushcliffe and myself wouldn't have listened to his arguments and followed him into his lobby if we hadn't been convinced by what he was saying, that there were limits to liberal imperialism and that he was a true liberal and understood those limits and understood what a difficult part of the world that is and the difficulties that we've met ever since. So he's been proved right on that. And I think if he was still here, or if he was in the other place shortly, he would have been really a very powerful advocate for our union, because his was a gentle patriotism, not some narrow-minded nationalism. And he would have been very generous also, I think, in terms of the participation of the Scottish National Parliament in this place, which I think is very important. And we must welcome that participation and recognise that they must take part in all our debates. And he would have been a powerful voice in that too. I think he would have been also a powerful voice and influence in other areas. For instance, his opposition to the coalition. I rather agreed with him with that, although I thought it would be quite disastrous for our party. In fact, I was proved wrong. It was disastrous from his own, but his opposition was principled. And I think it wasn't just that he recognised that it's difficult for a party of protest to become a party of power. As on Iraq, there was something much more principled than that. I think he instinctively believed that politics is not just about the pursuit of power, it's about the pursuit of truth also. And he was always a very powerful advocate. And lastly, when I saw him operate in the Council of Europe, I felt he was in his true métier there. Let's face it, let's not be too serious. Strasbourg is a convivial place. But there was much more to that. He was determined to extend freedom and democracy to Eastern Europe, and he played a powerful part in that body. So all those years I admired him. And I think it's truly said, isn't it, Mr. Speaker, that when we die, we can only take with us what we have given away. This man gave everything to our house. There never was a braver and a truer spirit. Yeah.